Hello and welcome to this installment of Vox Machina. As your narrator, I'll be bringing fantastic works of fiction from the page to your eardrums. Uploads will be posted weekly, so be sure to subscribe and hit the alerts bell to be notified when new installments are available. Got a story you think deserves the Vox Machina treatment? Let me know in a comment and you might just hear it in a future episode. Thanks for listening and on with the show. In Bad Faith by Fencer X. Episode 5. There was really only one person he could go to, for the simple reason there was only one person he'd even made mention of this predicament to, Hermione. But she was the obvious choice even barring their previous conversation, being the most clever person Harry knew and also the one likely to be the most level-headed about the whole thing. At least this had been his assumption, one he was presently beginning to reconsider. So, he began on another tea date, one he suspected Hermione had allowed if only to grill him about his abrupt departure and strange line of questioning at their previous engagement. I did have another favor to ask. You're racking up quite the debt to me, Harry Potter, she mused, stirring her teacup with a wry grin. Any chance you're ever going to pay off your tab, or should I chalk it up to a loss? Well, when I'm head Auror and you're Minister for Magic, you'll be my boss and can call in all the favors you like on your end, so I think we'll be even then. Ah, she nodded. How convenient that won't happen for at least another, 10 years? Come on, it's us. We can make it in 8? 5 if we're terribly ambitious, I think. She laughed, but in that way that said, I know you're stalling, so get on with it. So he did. I was wondering if you'd marry me. Hermione's teacup hit the carpet and went rolling, and her eyes boggled. If I'd... What? And then Harry heard what he'd just said, immediately on the defensive. Wait, no, not marry me, you, but you marry me. Ugh, bollocks, that didn't sound right either. No, it didn't, Hermione muttered, half to herself, and leapt to her feet to pace out her nerves, a habit she engaged in on the regular, Harry suspected, as he could see the faint outline of a path starting to be worn into her parlour-room rug. You need to start speaking quickly, and maybe be a bit more judicious with your words, because the last time you were here, you asked me all about wizarding marriages, and this time you, want to be in one? With me? Or officiated by me? I'm terribly confused. She sank back into her seat on the sofa, and Harry crouched down between them to pick up her teacup. Yeah, sorry, I got a bit ahead of myself. He quickly sketchified the spilt tea and settled back down across from her, leaning forward to rest his elbows on his knees. I need you to preside over a wedding ceremony. Officiate it, like you said, if that's possible, at least. She frowned, leaning forward herself. Like, a wedding for you? When he didn't deny the assumption, she made a little gasping sound in the back of her throat. Oh my gosh, Harry, I didn't even know you were seeing anyone. What? Is it that witch from Games and Sports, the one who mistook you for Keaton Flitney? Match made in heaven, if you ask me. She's probably the only person around with eyesight worse than you. Wow, thanks for that vote of confidence. And no, it's not her. Well, I was only half joking, but if not her, then who? Her brows waggled. I can't believe you've kept this from us. Oh, you better not have told Ron and not me, Harry Potter. She preemptively punched his shoulder, and he winced. She still had a mean right jab, which did not bode well for the remainder of the conversation. Is it serious? Gosh, who am I kidding? Of course it's serious, so spit it out! He held his hands up in a vain effort to both calm her down and fend off any further assault in his person. It's complicated, and there's a very good reason I haven't told you, either of you. And that reason is? When Harry continued to dither, trying to think of how best to frame the request, really, he should have prepped in front of a mirror for this. She reminded him, presumably I'm going to get to meet them at the ceremony you want me to preside over, so... Just, you've got to promise me you won't freak out, or jinx me, or hit me. Now Hermione was frowning. It's just, I need you to let me explain why I'm doing this, and not do any of the aforementioned freaking out or jinxing or hitting as might be your initial instinct. She shook her head. Harry, I don't understand what's so terrible about it's Draco Malfoy. She sputtered in laughter, reaching for the teapot to refill her cup. Right, pull the other one. No, I'm serious. That's who it is. Uh-huh. You want to resurrect you-know-who to be your best man while we're at it? She continued snickering at her own humour. Did Ron put you up to this? Tell him this doesn't count. He's going to have to try a lot harder to... Draco Malfoy's under a maledictus curse, and if he doesn't marry by his 20th birthday in just a few weeks, he'll be irreversibly transformed into a peacock and live out his days strutting about the Malfoy Manor grounds. I'd like to help ensure that doesn't happen, and I'm hoping you'll continue to be a gem and lend a hand with the ceremony. Hermione dropped her second cup of tea. Did you say maledictus? But... And then she was on her feet, hands slapped over her mouth in shock. That house elf! The one that spirited you away at the banquet, that was Malfoy's elf. He's been fetching me whenever Malfoy has a fit. It's what Allburn's been calling the uncontrolled transformations. They evidently hurt like hell, so I've been helping Malfoy through them. He paused, considering what he actually did during the fits, for very loose definitions of help. And now Hermione was pacing again, this time at a much more rapid clip than before. Are you out of your mind? Are you out of your mind? Did you ever get checked for brain damage after taking that second killing curse? Really, if you were technically dead for even a little bit, your brain might have been deprived of oxygen long enough to... Well, of course I'm not out of my mind. And this is what I meant by let me explain why I'm doing this. Hermione crossed her arms. Well then, by all means, explain away this ludicrous suggestion. This was going fantastic. Like I said, Malfoy's got this maledictus curse on him. He said a hag placed it on the family line ages back, and under the terms of the curse, if he doesn't marry someone by his 20th birthday, then the curse takes effect, which essentially turns him into a peacock, which under most circumstances would be absolutely hilarious. Believe me, I agree, but... He threw his head back against the chair, closing his eyes, and he could feel her watching him intently. I've seen it happen. His elf called it a prelude to the actual curse taking hold of him. When he gets emotional or out of sorts, it sends him into a fit and he transforms without meaning to. It's horrible, Hermione. I've never seen something so... It was like watching someone get crucioed over and over and over, and he screamed. He screamed the entire time. He opened his eyes and her expression was difficult to decipher. Like she wanted to pity Malfoy, but couldn't manage it. Harry couldn't blame her. She stopped pacing, though she still seemed overcome by a nervous energy, shifting back and forth from one foot to the other, arms still crossed. Well, has he told anyone about this? Reported it? Has anyone in his family? What do you think? Harry muttered. It's Malfoy. It's the Malfoys. You really expect them to make an appointment with the Janus Thickey ward at St. Mungo's? Good point. She tapped her chin, then seemed to force herself to sit back down, going about it in a very jerky manner. All right, start from the beginning again. How on earth did you get involved with Malfoy in the first place? Well, it really was a work assignment. The DMLEs passed me off to the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures for the spring training session, which has been just riveting work. Do let Ron know how much fun he's missed. She snorted softly, but did not interrupt. Anyway, they tasked me with menial work the actual department members don't want to have to deal with, and in this case, over a month back by now, I got assigned de-doxying duty at Malfoy Manor. Doxies? They've got doxies. It wouldn't have been the worst thing infesting that place, would it? Hermione shuddered in remembrance, rubbing her arms. And as it turns out, it wasn't doxies at all, actually. It was, and seriously, you can't mention this to anyone, as I haven't exactly reported it yet. Hermione frowned, and before she could start a lecture, he continued. It was imps. Escaped from a small portal Malfoy had apparently been trying to generate so he could summon a proper demon. A demon? Yep. Luckily for, well, everyone, he'd only been able to manage a portal large enough for a few imps to slip through, and they started leeching his essence before he could try widening the rift. When I asked him what the hell he'd been thinking, I eventually got it out of him that he'd been hoping to leverage a demonic pact against this curse on his bloodline. Apparently, he's been neck-deep in research, trying to solve the thing himself for months. Now, the deadline's coming up fast, and he's getting desperate. Hermione nodded. So he's prevailed upon you to step in and save him once more, has he? What? Oh, no, I'm the one who suggested it. She froze. You what? You suggest... Oh, Harry, she groaned. This again? A flash of defensiveness speared through him. What do you mean, this again? She sank back down onto the sofa, head in her hands. I mean this. getting caught up in whatever mess Draco Malfoy's gotten himself into. When have I ever... 6th year, when you insisted on stalking him wherever he went, he was up to something. I was wholly vindicated. 7th year, when you nearly got us all killed going back for him and his lackeys when the fiend fire was nearly upon us. And what was I supposed to do? Just let him die? Sometimes, yes. You've got to let people pay for their own mistakes. And what mistake was this? One of his great times 18 grandparents fucked over a hag, and now he's got to take the fall for it. He shook his head. It had been a mistake asking this of Hermione. He didn't blame her for her clear reluctance, but he didn't have time to deal with this right now. Just forget it. I'll find someone else. He moved to stand, and she quickly reached over to lay a hand on his knee, staying him. Oh, don't be like that, Harry. It's not that I don't want. It's just... Well... She lifted her brows. He didn't ask you to do this, did he? You offered? And what was that supposed to mean? You think he'd ask for water to put himself out if he were on fire? He'd wait till someone pissed on him or merrily be reduced to ashes. Assholes like him are too proud for their own good. And rather than come to me or anyone else looking for answers, you just decided to solve it on your own and, oh my God, marry him? Really? Is this what the poem said? There's a poem? Hermione sat up a bit straighter, casting about for something, and then grabbed a notepad and quill from a writing desk. It figures there'd be a poem. What did it say? Oh, Harry wrinkled his nose. This had been nearly a month ago now, hadn't it? There was something about blonde hair and 20 summers and a ring and the Malfoy line ending. Hermione stared at him, expression slack. What? I'm supposed to have remembered it when I heard it all at once? Obviously, I took away the most important part, which is that all that needs to happen is Malfoy's got to be married to someone by his 20th birthday, which is June the 2nd. She lifted a brow, and he quickly amended. Or so he told me. Hermione rolled her eyes. How am I meant to help him break this curse if I don't know the details of it? I wasn't going to ask you to break it. I mean, not right away. We just need an officiate. Surely that's an easier task than breaking a centuries-old bloodline curse, yeah? Harry laughed, but Hermione did not seem to find this funny at all. Why does it have to be you, though? Oh, do you have any idea what you're proposing, Harry? Well, yeah, marriage. She looked like she wanted to throw a paperweight at his head now, and he held his hands up in defense. Right, poor timing. I mean, yes, I realize what I'm suggesting, and believe me, Malfoy was no more enthused with the idea at first than you are. Nice to see he's at least got some good sense. But I really don't see the problem. The curse says he needs to be married, so he'll be married. And then once we're certain we've freed him from the curse, we can get divorced. Or an annulment, like you mentioned. No harm, no foul. He searched her face, suddenly concerned by her concern. That should be fine, right? Well, I mean, of course I'd need to see the actual language of the curse, this poem you mentioned, to ensure it really would only take a simple ceremony to satisfy the terms. And what was the bit about his line ending? It doesn't require a child be conceived, right? That might be difficult on such short notice, not to mention the mountain of associated ethical and consent issues. No, I'm pretty sure... Hold up, what do you mean on such short notice? You mean at all, right? Hermione was nibbling on her quill, seemingly lost in thought. It's me and Malfoy. We're blokes? What? Oh, don't be daft, Harry. Of course you'd still be able to have children. Not that I in any way support any sort of procreation with that cretin. But conceptually, of course it would be possible. Harry blanched as visions of himself waddling around sporting a baby bump danced through his head. His queasiness must have been writ large on his features, for Hermione immediately amended, Through magic! Magic, naturally. I mean, there's all sorts of spells for surrogacy and the like. I even read there's a coven of witches in Finland who grow their offspring communally in a cauldron. And now he was picturing Malfoy standing proudly before a bubbling cauldron in potions class, with Snape reaching in and pulling out a screeching little Malfoy clone already wearing Harry's glasses and proclaiming, Top marks, Mr. Malfoy, but no accounting for taste. Regardless, Hermione said, snapping Harry's attention back to the present. As it is, I'm afraid I can't see why a perfectly legal wizarding marriage wouldn't satisfy the terms of this curse, much as I might wish otherwise. Oh, well that was fantastic, wasn't it? Seriously? So, then you'll do it? Do what? Had she not been paying attention? Officiate! We need someone to actually oversee the ceremony, and for obvious reasons, we'd rather keep this close to the vest. The fewer people who know about this, the easier it'll be to pretend it never happened once the thing's off. Oh, right. She wiped a hand over her face and sighed, massaging her neck. I suppose I could look into getting ordained. I hear it's not too terribly difficult. A couple of forms, a licensing fee, that sort of thing, but she held up a finger when Harry looked like he was about to celebrate. I'm warning you, Harry, this isn't a contract to be entered into lightly. Like I told you, wizarding wedding ceremonies involve very old, very complicated magic, and with a curse thrown into the mix, well, I can't promise it'll be undone quite as easily as you might be hoping. Harry frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means you should ask yourself if you're prepared for it to be unable to be undone, worst case scenario. Oh, fuck. Because with next to no time to dig into the particulars of this curse or do half the research I might want to, I do have a job, as do you. Then, while yes, it might save Malfoy from what sounds like a fate worse than death, it might doom you to your own fate worse than death in the doing. Well, that wasn't much choice at all, was it? After all, what really were Malfoy's alternatives this late in the game? There were none as far as Harry could see, and he suspected Malfoy couldn't see any either, or else he surely would have proposed them by now. The options were marry Malfoy, maybe for forever, and in doing so never be able to legally marry someone else he might actually love, or let Malfoy die. Let him turn into a fucking peacock forever. It was Malfoy's life weighed against Harry's hypothetical future happiness. So he asked himself if he was prepared for it to be undoable, and no, he wasn't really prepared for it, but he was ready to accept it, he supposed. Really, it was Malfoy who would be less likely to go along so blithely, but if he hadn't thought of this potential eventuality himself, Harry certainly wasn't going to bring it to his attention. Harry sighed. I dove into fire to save his ungrateful ass once. What's once more in the grand scheme of things? Hermione's expression seemed half disappointed, half resigned, like she'd kind of expected this from him, but had still hoped otherwise. Well, let it be on your head, then. Right, I suppose I'll look into becoming an officiate, so you and Malfoy should make sure you've got the vows squared away. Vows? Oh, right. I mean, I was just gonna go with the usual, having, holding, blah blah blah. Hermione fixed him with a blank stare. I mean the vows. The vows you take during the ceremony. Harry wasn't certain what she was getting at. I think I do. Like I said, I was there at Bill and Fleur's wedding, and I haven't actually been to a Muggle one, but I've seen a couple on the television before. Seems like pretty standard stuff. What? No, I mean like the consummation clause? Harry hadn't a clue what that was, but he already didn't like the sound of it. The influx? The blood boon? Oh my god! She leapt to her feet and sprinted over to her bookcase, where after a few moments, muttering to herself, she pulled a tome and handed it to Harry. He wrinkled his nose at the title. Hitched for the Bewitched, A Complete Idiot's Guide to Wizarding Marriage, evidently by the acclaimed author of So You're Marrying a Pureblood. Why the hell do you have this? It was the sort of insipid tripe Harry thought he'd seen Ginny giggling over in the common room with her girlfriends once upon a time. It doesn't matter, just take it, study it, and let me know what day I need to clear my schedule for. In the meantime, I'll be spending a bit of time down on level 2, I expect, getting in good with the administrative registration department, so they won't ask too many questions when I have to submit a marriage certificate that I don't want anyone peeking at too closely. Harry felt his shoulders sag in relief. Thank you, Hermione, seriously. He'll owe you massively for this. Not half as much as he'll owe you. She pursed her lips, then settled in the chair just next to the one Harry presently occupied, leaning in close and studying his features. You are doing this because you feel sorry for him or something, right? What? Why else would I? I mean to say, you aren't actually attracted to him. You aren't dating him, and this is some elaborate scheme to... Oh, God, no! I can't say I'd be thrilled for you, but I do want you to know I at least wouldn't judge you. Well, all right, I might judge you a little, but I like to think I'd be open to it. Hermione, honestly, you're so far off the mark, it's not even funny. And Ron would throw a fit, probably not talk to you for a few days, but he'd come around. At least he wouldn't burn you off the family tapestry like some folks might. Oh, God, Ron. Harry held up his hands to stop her before she jumped headlong into any more wild conclusions. First off, I'm most definitely not secretly dating Malfoy. There is no elaborate scheme. I'm too much a Gryffindor to scheme. But Malfoy might. But he didn't. It was like pulling teeth to get him to agree to this, so trust that neither of us is thrilled with the prospect of being hitched to one another, however short or long that might be. But we're going to do it. With your help, I'm hoping. He gave her a long look, and she sighed and nodded. Excellent. Oh, and also, if you could maybe not mention this business to Ron, at least not until it's said and done and there's nothing he could do to stop it, like stage a hunger strike or anything. Hermione laughed, a bit more genuinely this time. Well, ordinarily, I don't like any of us keeping secrets. Harry wondered if that extended to reasons for owning books about marrying into pureblood families. But I think Ron might sleep just a little bit more soundly if he learned you were very briefly Harry Potter Malfoy only once the annulment paperwork has been filed. Harry choked on the biscuit he just discreetly stuffed into his mouth, coughing violently. Harry Potter, what did you say? The implication that he would be taking Malfoy's name was, it turned out, not the worst thing he took away from Hermione's flat. It was the book, which he did as instructed for once, and read. Well, not so much read as skimmed, admittedly, but he still picked up the broad strokes, which left him feeling so queasy he forwent dinner altogether. Like the consummation clause, which to Harry's abject relief nowadays did not actually involve consummation, but rather required the couple spend 30 uninterrupted days and nights under the same roof. It seemed ridiculous the more he read about it. The newlyweds couldn't leave the wedding site, not even together, without the contract being nullified. What about a honeymoon? What if there was an emergency? And what was Harry meant to do if he couldn't go into work? He had all of 3 sick days he could use. The rest would be down to head Auror Robards' very generous magnanimity. Just what Harry needed, incoming accusations of favoritism before he'd even joined the Auror force properly. And then there was the influx. A phenomenon apparently brought on by the fucking blood pact, wherein he and Malfoy would be expected to share blood in a magical ritual that sounded dreadfully unsanitary at best and downright deadly at worst. If this was a blood curse afflicting Malfoy, would it transfer to Harry? Was he going to become a peacock in the doing, or would the same terms then apply to him, the wedding to Malfoy protecting him as much as his would-be husband? That alone was enough to give him pause, until he read on and learned that the shared blood mingling between their bodies would form a magical tether that would, at least for the first few years, allow the two of them to sense each other's emotions. Fucking fantastic. The only kind of cool aspect to this whole wedding ritual was turning out to be the blood boon, which the book explained would present as a magical boost they could benefit from when touching one another as the bit of each other's blood in their own body called out to its original owner, drawing on their strength and empowering each spouse. Harry suspected that might prove pretty useful, except there was little chance of Harry ever being pinned down in a firefight with Malfoy close enough to reach over and hold hands just to make his jinxes pack a bit more punch. Nice, but not too terribly useful, and certainly not outweighing the inconvenience of the consummation clause or concern regarding the influx. He didn't bother bringing any of this up with Malfoy, though. After all, Malfoy was a pureblood and probably knew all about these stuffy rituals already, right? Of course right. And since Malfoy didn't seem inclined to offer much beyond the odd monosyllabic grunt when Harry explained that Hermione had kindly agreed to oversee the ceremony, don't call it that. All right, what should I call it? Literally anything else. Fine, she's agreed to oversee our wedding. Harry didn't bother to elaborate further either. Indeed, Malfoy seemed disinterested in aiding in the preparation efforts at all, as if it wasn't his soon-to-be feathery arse on the line if they didn't pull this off. But to his great credit, old Byrne pulled through, proving quite an enthusiastic participant now he had his master's tacit permission to do everything in his power to see that the wedding was a success. He was only too happy to recite the poem for Hermione, accompanying Harry to her flat after Malfoy abjectly refused to allow anyone into the manor until the day of the ceremony. "I won't have you turning my home into a zoo," he'd snarled, and his mood had not improved when Harry had corrected, "Our home, darling." Old Byrne, being much more learned on the particulars of Malfoy's curse than Harry was, related everything he knew to Hermione, who seemed utterly fascinated by the complex magic at play. Harry had to remind her at regular intervals that a man's life was essentially at stake here, and it would be better all around if they could break the curse before they had to go through with the wedding. "Well, of course I know that," Hermione said defensively, "but it's not every day you get to encounter an actual blood curse. Do you think Malfoy will allow me to write a paper about it?" Perhaps, Harry concluded, it was better she not visit the manor before it was absolutely necessary after all. Somewhere between her research and getting ordained and throwing Ron off the scent as to why she and Harry were spending so much time together, "We're trying to plan a surprise birthday party for someone, and if you don't mind your own business, it won't be for you. But my birthday was like 2 months ago." "Well, that's what makes it a surprise." Hermione still found time to harass Harry about what he was planning to wear to the wedding. "Surely you aren't planning on wearing your plain old dress robes for the ceremony, right?" she said as she guided Harry toward Twilfit and Tattings. It was a bustling Wednesday morning in May, and Diagon Alley was packed. Harry, under a series of spells meant to disguise him beyond recognition, found himself silently praying Malfoy would have another fit, just so old Byrne might appear and spirit him away from the crushing crowds. "Well," Harry said, releasing a sharp "oof" as an old witch nailed him right in the solar plexus with her oversized handbag. I mean, yeah, I was, actually. Is there some reason I shouldn't? He ducked, narrowly missing being scalped by a low-flying delivery owl. It's not as if this'll be real. It'll be real enough for the curse. Show it some respect. Harry chuckled. It's magic, not a person. Hermione reached for the door to Twilfit and Tattings. Magic can have a curious sentience at times. She threw a knowing look at Harry. Do you want to risk it? And no, after going through all this trouble, of course he didn't. Well, then, why don't we go to Madame Malkin's, or one of the second-hand shops? I'm not dropping a month's salary. You don't get paid, Harry, on a set of robes I'll never wear again. Hermione cast a quick glance around. The shop was mostly empty, the only visible attendants in the back, taking measurements from another customer and cooing compliments at them as they admired themselves in a floating mirror. When she spoke again, she dropped her voice to a loud whisper. And what if you are able to successfully annul this you-know-what, and find someone you actually want to get you-know-what to in the future? You'll already have a lovely set of robes for it then. Right, because I'm definitely going to want to wear the same clothes I got you-know-whatted to you-know-who in. Oh, God. I think we need to stop with the code speak. You sound like you're getting hitched to Voldemort now. Harry quite agreed, and they spent the rest of the afternoon discussing colour and fabrics and cuts and lengths and all sorts of other things Harry didn't give two figs about. He ultimately allowed himself to be outfitted in the simplest set of dress robes the attendants had in stock, which was already far more extravagant than anything Harry had crumpled in the back of his wardrobe. Hermione seemed satisfied in the end, claiming Harry looked quite handsome in the dark trailing fabric that she felt would contrast nicely with his natural eye colour, and though he didn't really see it himself, he took her word for it. After parting with a small fortune, he left her to the remainder of her shopping. She was heading to a jewellery shop now, for she was in charge of procuring rings for them, and he wanted no part in that, and returned home to reconsider the life choices that had brought him to this point.